70,000 corpses, each one tagged, filed, and stamped. Legal. That's Henry VIII's England. Forget the fat man with 6 wives. That's the Disney version. The real Henry turned law into a guillotine, executing an estimated 70,000 of his own people. Nobles, peasants, priests, sheep thieves, children. All sanctioned by statute. And if you think I'm exaggerating, wait until you hear how he killed his best friends, his wives, and even 11-year-olds. The blood wasn't a side effect. It was policy. You know the rhyme. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Catchy. Easy to teach children. A neat way to turn mass murder into a sing-along. But here's the part the rhyme buries. Henry VIII didn't just kill wives. He killed everyone. Nobles, priests, farmers, beggars. Somewhere between 57,000 and 72,000 people executed in his name. The 6 wives are the myth, the cover story. The distraction from a kingdom of gallows and rotting heads. What the portraits hide in oil and gold, the chronicles whisper in blood, ready to hear what they erased. Forget the rhyme about wives for a second, because the first people Henry VIII kills are not queens. They are accountants. In 1510, barely weeks after his coronation, London still reeks of roasting boar and spilled ale from the celebrations when 2 men are dragged to Tower Hill. Their names, Edmund Dudley and Richard Empson, financial ministers to Henry's father, Henry VII. Everyone hated them for squeezing nobles, dry with invented taxes, perfect scapegoats. The crowd cheers. At last, the blood price for years of fiscal misery. But here's the secret the schoolbooks skip. This is not justice. This is training. The new king is teaching England one rule: defy him and die. The executions set precedent. Chronicler Edward Hall later wrote Henry boldly cut down those councillors to win obedience. Translation? Treason is now whatever Henry decides over breakfast. Fast forward 20 years. The prince, once called the Golden Boy, now limps through his palace corridors, flesh rotting from a leg ulcer. He mutters under his breath about loyalty, glances at courtiers like a hunter scanning prey. Parliament? Rubber stamp. Judges? Puppets. One wrong look, one whispered prayer to Rome, and the gallows are waiting. 1534. The Act of Supremacy. It sounds bureaucratic. In reality, it detonates the kingdom. The law declares Henry supreme head of the Church of England. From that moment, belief becomes lethal. Say the Pope has authority? Treason. Refuse the oath? Treason. Even dream about Henry's death? Treason. You think I'm exaggerating? Tudor statutes defined imagining the king's death as grounds for execution. Imagine losing your head because of a nightmare you never told anyone. Picture the courtroom. Dark oak walls sweating candlelight. The smell of damp wool and unwashed bodies. Defendants stare straight ahead, careful not to blink. Inside their heads, a single prayer. Don't breathe. Don't speak. Don't die today. The verdict? Guilty. The trial? Optional. This is what later chronicles blur behind portraits and hymns. They show us the king's gloved hand, not the rope biting into calloused wrists. By the 1540s, this legal machinery is unstoppable. Statutes multiply like weeds. Proclamation by the Crown Act, 1539, seals the deal. Translation: the king's word is law. He no longer even needs Parliament to pass death sentences. Every edict Henry utters has immediate teeth, and they bite hard. How many died? Scholars argue. Some say 57,000. Others push it to 72,000. That is 1 in 80 Englishmen, killed not by plague, not by war, but by law, by Henry. Imagine your local village, green. 80 faces. Count them off. 1 in the noose. Londoners joked their heads on London Bridge were Tudor Yelp reviews. Steal sheep? Lose your head. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. Behind the joke is terror. Nobles whisper in corridors. Peasants flinch when new proclamations are nailed to church doors. Every head spiked on the bridge teaches the same sermon. Your loyalty is temporary, your death permanent. And Henry is only warming up. Because if the first victims are accountants and petty thieves, the next are queens and kingmakers. Stick around. The scaffold is about to get crowded. Mist hangs low over the Tower of London on a July morning in 1535, clinging to stone walls and the murmurs of a crowd that dares not speak too loudly. They know what is coming. At the centre of the scaffold stands Sir Thomas More, Henry VIII's closest friend, the man who wrote Utopia, the man who once laughed beside the king at banquets, teasing him across gold-laden tables. Today he dies for a single word he will not say. He refuses to call Henry the head of the church, and that silence has become treason. Witnesses record the moment. More adjusts his beard, so it will not be struck by the axe, and jokes to the executioner. This has committed no treason. Imagine laughing as the blade hovers above your neck. Imagine the nobles in the crowd glancing at one another, every face blank, but every thought screaming the same prayer. If he can die, none of us are safe. In that instant, every whisper in England feels like it might be the last. Less than a year later, Henry turns on his own queen. Anne Boleyn, the woman he broke from Rome to marry, is accused of adultery, incest, even witchcraft. The evidence is absurd. Confessions invented or beaten out of terrified men. The trial lasts hours. Verdict decided before it begins. William Brereton, one of the accused, whispers as he climbs the scaffold, "If you judge, judge the best." Tudor, "Speak, for I am innocent, but you will kill me anyway." And they do. 5 men die first. Then Anne follows, escorted to the block in a gown of deep crimson, hair pinned beneath a linen coif. A French swordsman is imported for the occasion, promised to make the death clean. 1 swift stroke. The crowd marvels at his precision, as if grace in murder makes it holy. They cheer the king's justice, blind to the silence that follows. Somewhere in the crowd, a teenage maid watches her queen's head fall into straw and learns the first rule of Henry's court. Loyalty is a death sentence. Years later, Thomas Cromwell, the man who engineered Anne's downfall, the king's iron right hand, faces the same blade. His crime? Arranging Henry's failed marriage to Anne of Cleves. No defense allowed. No appeal. The verdict is already written in Henry's mind. Cromwell kneels, and the axe comes down badly. Chroniclers say it takes several blows. The crowd groans. A dark joke spreads through taverns. Serve the king long enough, and he thanks you with a blunt axe. Even children are not spared. 11-year-old Alice Glaston is hanged in Leominster in 1546. No one remembers her crime, only the sight of her small body swinging beside grown men. Chroniclers barely mention her. England barely notices. By now, death is scenery. Then comes Catherine Howard, Henry's 5th wife, barely 19, charged with adultery, dragged to the block 2 months after her lovers, Francis Derham and Thomas Culpeper, are killed. Derham suffers the full horror, hanged, drawn, and quartered, entrails burned before him as the crowd recoils. Culpeper receives the mercy of beheading. Catherine rehearses her own death the night before, kneeling over and over, practicing where to place her head. Think about that. A teenager, drilling her own execution like it's a dance step. By this point, the killings are background noise. Nobles flinch at proclamations nailed to church doors. Courtiers stare straight ahead in corridors, afraid to blink. Every smile feels temporary. Every silence feels dangerous. This is the part the rhyme about 6 wives erases. The myth paints a glutton with wives. The reality is a kingdom of gallows. A nation ruled by a man who rewrote treason to mean whatever he wants it to mean today. And if you think this is as bad as it gets, wait until faith itself rises up against him. Because the next time England bleeds, it won't be 5 victims or 10. It will be thousands. And Henry will meet prayer with slaughter. By the 26th year of Henry's reign, executions are no longer news. Heads rot on London Bridge like grim decorations. Children walking to school play guessing games about which one used to be a neighbor. Priests vanish from pulpits. Farmers glance at nailed proclamations and think, "Don't blink, don't breathe, don't die today. This is normal now." And then, suddenly, it is not enough. In the autumn of 1536, northern England rises. Picture wet farmland and freezing winds. Monasteries feeding the poor, housing the sick, teaching children their prayers. Henry seizes those monasteries for cash. He calls it reform. To the north, it feels like stealing from God himself. 40,000 men and women march, not with weapons, but with crucifixes. Not chanting war cries, but hymns. Their leader, Robert Asker, a lawyer from Yorkshire, wears a badge stitched with the 5 wounds of Christ. He believes Henry will listen. He believes faith will protect them. Imagine the trust it takes to walk barefoot toward a king who builds his power on scaffolds. Henry listens, smiles, invites Asker to London, feasts him in palaces, shows him tapestries of biblical kings and whispers about mercy. Asker returns north with pardons and promises, telling the pilgrims to disperse. Go home. The king is merciful. Weeks later, soldiers ride out. The pardons are revoked. The promises burned. The pilgrimage is declared treason. Asker is dragged back to York in chains. He is hanged above the market square, his body left in iron for months. Mothers shield their children's eyes. Fathers whisper prayers. The message is clear. No promise is sacred, not even the king's. The killings spread. Lord Darcy, 70 years old, once a celebrated soldier, executed. Sir Robert Constable, hanged in chains at Hull. Lord Hussey, Chamberlain to Princess Mary, dragged to the block. Priests, blacksmiths, millers, even minor gentry. At least 200 leaders die. Between 1536 and 1537, their bodies scattered across northern England. Limbs nailed to gates, skulls spiked on city walls, like grotesque welcome signs. People joke in whispers that Tudor road maps are just body parts with directions. Humor in a kingdom where laughter can get you hanged. Villagers learn survival through silence. Children recite loyalty prayers in whispers. Neighbors avoid eye contact, unsure who might inform. The new Treasons Act even criminalizes thoughts. To imagine the king's death is treason. Imagine waking from a nightmare where Henry dies and wondering if that dream could kill you. This is what history hides behind the rhyme about 6 wives. They show the portraits, not the carrion birds feeding on rebel corpses. They teach about queens in silks, not farmers left rotting in chains. The Pilgrimage of Grace is not a footnote. It is the largest rebellion of Henry's reign, and its end is a lesson in terror. Faith will not save you. Promises mean nothing. By year 5, gallows stand in every market town. By year 10, children know to avert their eyes from spiked heads. By year 15, executions are so frequent, nobody even counts. By the time Henry dies, 1 in 80 Englishmen will have been killed by statute. Not plague, not war, law itself. And if you think mass rebellion was the end of Henry's paranoia, you're wrong. Because the next victims are not farmers or priests. They are his own counselors, his own wives. Even his own body will betray him, rotting while he still breathes. Stay with me. The bloodbath is not finished. It is about to get personal. By the 1540s, Henry is no longer the Golden Prince painted in Holbein's portraits. The man in those paintings, with his broad chest and jewel-studded gloves, is gone. What remains is swollen flesh and festering wounds, a body collapsing in on itself. His leg ulcer stinks so badly. Courtiers press perfumed cloths to their faces and pretend it is incense. He cannot walk unaided. He is hauled through palaces on contraptions of wood and rope, carried like a relic that bleeds. And yet, somehow, his power only grows sharper, because in this state, every word he speaks is law. Parliament no longer debates him. They nod. Judges no longer deliberate. They sign death warrants before the trials even begin. Henry mutters about loyalty while pacing in private chambers, ranting at shadows no one else can see. Servants pretend not to hear, holding their breath, whispering to themselves, "Don't blink. Don't breathe. Don't die today." His paranoia eats through England like gangrene. Friends become enemies overnight. Thomas Cromwell, who built the machinery of death for Henry, is destroyed by it in 1540. His crime? Arranging the king's failed marriage to Anne of Cleves. The trial is a farce. The verdict is decided before the charges are even read. The execution is a disaster, multiple blows hacking at bone while the crowd winces. Dark jokes spread through taverns. Work for Henry long enough, and he rewards you with a blunt axe. Henry's religious policy is equally unhinged. One year, he burns Catholics for denying his supremacy. The next, he burns Protestants for rejecting Catholic doctrine. To him, this is balance. To everyone else, it is madness. Imagine living in a country where both sides of the same argument are punishable by death, where lighting the wrong candle in church can get you hanged. His body mirrors his mind. By 1545, he weighs over 300 pounds. Chroniclers describe him screaming at courtiers one moment and weeping the next. Food spills down his robes, wine drips into his beard. He imagines plots in every corner. Letters vanish. Servants disappear. Even his children grow terrified to speak around him. And in this collapsing palace, surrounded by tapestries and stench, Henry dreams of the dead. Chroniclers whisper he talks to them, wives he executed, rebels he hanged, friends he betrayed. He orders fresh executions in the morning to silence screams only he can hear at night. The nursery rhyme says, "Divorced, beheaded, died." It leaves out this part. The king who killed 70,000 and then couldn't escape them in his sleep. By the time Henry dies in 1547, the death toll is staggering. Nobles and peasants, priests and children, somewhere between 57,000 and 72,000 lives ended in the name of law. Not plague, not famine, not battlefield chaos. Legal murder. And the cruelty lingers long after him. The gallows do not fall silent. The heads do not come down from the bridges. The weapon Henry forged, law itself, outlives him. This is the part the portraits refuse to show. The glinting jewels, the grand titles, defender of the faith, those are the myth. The reality is a kingdom ruled by terror, a monarch who rewrote treason to mean whatever he needed it to mean. And the question that lingers over every scaffold is this: did Henry wield the law, or did the law itself become Henry? We remember Henry VIII for his 6 wives. That nursery rhyme they teach in school, it hides the real story, because behind those portraits of gold and velvet was a kingdom of gallows. Behind the rhyme was a death toll so staggering that even chroniclers whisper it: 50, 7,000, 70, 2000, no one knows for certain. Every one of those deaths signed off not by sword but by statute. The law itself became the executioner. Henry turned Parliament into a rubber stamp, the church into a weapon, and justice into theatre. He killed nobles and peasants, queens and children, Catholics and Protestants, sometimes in the same week. He burned people for denying him, then burned others for agreeing with him the wrong way. Think about that. Imagine living in a country where both sides of an argument are punishable by death. And when Henry finally died in 1547, the blood didn't stop. The gallows stayed standing. The heads stayed spiked on London Bridge. So here's the question no rhyme ever asks. When law itself is the murder weapon, who is really ruling? The king, or the terror he leaves behind? Thank you for watching. And if you want the next truth they tried to hide, click the video on the screen to see the mass execution they tried to erase.